Perhaps no other case decided by the court in the 20th century has had so profound an effect on the social fabric of America as Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. By the end of World War II, dramatic changes in American race relations were already underway. The integration of labor unions in the 1930s under the eye of the Fair Employment Practices Commission and the desegregation of the armed forces by President Truman in 1948 marked major steps toward racial integration. The legal framework on which segregation rested, formally established in 1896 by the court's Plessy v. Ferguson decision, was itself being dismantled. It was challenged repeatedly by the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The doctrine of separate but equal was beginning to crack.
Linda Brown, an 8-year-old African-American girl, had been denied permission to attend an elementary school only 5 blocks from her home in Topeka, Kansas. School officials refused to register her at the nearby school, assigned her instead to a school for non-white students some 21 blocks from her home. Separate elementary schools for whites and non-whites were maintained by the Board of Education in Topeka. Linda Brown's parents filed a lawsuit to force the schools to admit her to the nearby, but segregated school for white students. The central question addressed to the court involved the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of equal educational opportunities? In short, the court was asked to determine whether the segregation of schools was at all constitutional. Argument for Linda Brown, led by Thurgood Marshall, an NAACP litigator who would be appointed to the court in 1967. Brown's attorney argued that the operation of separate schools based on race was harmful to African American children. Extensive testimony was provided to support the contention that legal segregation resulted in both fundamentally unequal education and low self-esteem among minority students. The Brown family's lawyer argued that segregation by law implied that African Americans were inherently inferior to whites. For these reasons, they asked the court to shrink down segregation under the law. For the Board of Education, attorneys for Topeka argued that the separation of schools for non-whites in Topeka were equal in every way and were in complete conformity with the Plessy standard. Buildings, of course, study offered and the quality of teachers were completely comparable. In fact, because some federal funds for Native Americans only applied at the non-white school, some programs for minority children were actually better than those offered at the schools for whites. They pointed to the Plessy decision of 1896 to support segregation and argued that they had, in good faith, created equal facilities, even though races were segregated. Furthermore, they argued discrimination by race did not harm the children and their education.
After 3 long years, the case finally ended on May 17, 1954, with the court finding in favor of Linda Brown and the other African American children like her. The Supreme Court said that it was not fair to have black and white students separated in different schools. The judges voted on this case in a unanimous decision of 9-0. Brown v. Board of Education quoted, "In the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." However, even after this decision, it took some states many years to put students together in schools and have them treated the same, because many people were still prejudiced against African Americans. The Brown decision did more than just reverse the Plessy doctrine of separate but equal. It reversed centuries of segregationist practice and thought in America. For that reason, the Brown decision is seen as a transforming event, the birth of a political and social revolution. In a later case called Brown 2, Warren had suggested 2 decisions, the first dealing with the constitutionality of segregation, and the second with the implementation of the decision. The court directed an end to school segregation by race with all deliberate speed. The Brown decision became the cornerstone of the social justice movement of the 1950s and 1960s. It finally brought the spirit of the 14th Amendment into practice, more than 3/4 of a century after that amendment had been passed.